Thank you for joining us once again. This is Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Emeka Daniel is my name. Here on Western Spring Television on Morning Spring, we bring you the best of news analysis, starting with newspaper reviews from the pages of Nigerian newspapers. But then afterwards, we dive into discussions, critical discussions with stakeholders about issues around our nation and how we can proffer solutions as well to these pressing issues. And that's what we do here every day from Mondays to Fridays. It's a beautiful Friday morning. Thank God it's Friday. Of course, we are winding down. It's been a busy week. A lot has happened over the week. Just yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Governor Monday Okpebolo of Edo State, upholding his election as the governor of Edo State. And of course, as for Igodalo, his opponent feels cheated, but he has no choice than to accept the ruling of the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is the final stop when it comes to court rulings in Nigeria. So um, what do we say? Congratulations to Governor Monday Okpebolo of Edo State. Also, the Senate President Godswill Akpabio has removed Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan as chair of the Senate Committee on Diaspora. That came during their plenary. She was removed without any official reasons given, although the Senate President also said there will be some, rejigging, so to speak, of the Senate committees. Some people are holding more than one vice presidential vice chairmanship roles in the Senate. He said they will look into that and make sure they harmonize everything just to streamline their operations. But bottom line is that Natasha has been removed as the chair of the Senate Committee on Diaspora. She hasn't resumed after being reinstated by the court. She said she's waiting for the CTC, that's the certified true copy of the court ruling that reinstated her as senator. Recall that she was suspended from the Senate. The Senate has also requested an apology. At some point, at some time, she actually issued a satirical apology, but the Senate this time around, they want a real apology. And of course, other issues talking about the visa crunch in Nigeria, about other countries, other nations like the United States, the UAE, the UK, Canada, tightening their grip, imposing stricter visa restrictions on Nigerians. We'll be looking into that as well in the course of the program this morning. Please stay with us. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll go straight to the newspaper headlines. Thank you for staying with us. We move straight to the front pages of the Nigerian newspapers this morning. We start from the front page of the Guardian newspaper. On the Guardian newspaper this morning, imagine boom in home services, costly substitute for ailing hospitals. Imagine boom in home services, costly substitute for ailing hospitals as a banner headline on the Guardian newspaper this morning. And below that, you can see the picture of caregivers, health workers, um, just to show the cost of imagine booming home services, and of course how it affects ailing hospitals. Moving towards the top strip of the Guardian newspaper this morning. INEC deploys online party registration. INEC deploys online party registration portal as applications hit 129. INEC deploys online party registration portals as application hit 129. You'll find that story on page 3. Talking about associations in Nigeria submitting applications to be registered as political parties. Now we learned that there are up to 129 Initially, about 110 submitted their applications, then another 12 submitted. Now, INEC is saying they have 129 applications, and they are introducing online registration portal for them just to make it easier. So many associations trying to register, to get registered as political parties in Nigeria. The question again is it about the quantity rather, or the quality? Should it be about the quantity or the quality of political parties we have? But every Nigerian association has the right to aspire to become a political party. So let's see how that plays out. Moving on to other stories, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. FG shrugs off US pressure to accept foreign prisoners, deportees. FG shrugs off US pressure to accept foreign prisoners, deportees. You'll find our story on page 3. And beside that, we have 210 trillion naira probe. Senate berates NNPCL boss for defiance, issues ultimatum. 210 trillion naira probe. Senate berates NNPCL boss for defiance, issues ultimatum. You'll find a story on page 3, talking about the corruption in Nigeria's oil sector, especially the NNPCL, where a fraud of 210 trillion naira was discovered, was uncovered. The EFCC calls it mind-boggling fraud in the NNPCL. And the Senate, of course, has given NNPCL an ultimatum to appear before it. So far, that has not been done, and they've issued another ultimatum. You might want to read up that story on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Away from that, still on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Security operatives killed, others missing in fresh Benue attack. Security operatives killed, others missing in fresh Benue attack. You can read up that story on page 30. Quite unfortunate. Benue State. We've been having attacks over and over again. I mean, the last one, the most serious one so far, where up to, some people report that up to 200 people lost their lives. It was a massacre. Some called it an attempt to annihilate the total population in Yelewata in that area. And of course, the president, Mr. President, visited, gave assurances that our security agencies are on top of the matter. And recently, the National Security Advisor this week also made some comments saying that, our military guys, they're on top of their game. They're doing their best. That everywhere is totally safe in Nigeria. That's according to the NSA, Malam Nuhu Ribadu. But here we have it that we're still having fresh attacks in Benue State. Security operatives are being killed in Benue State. Also, we have some, attacks in Plateau State as well. So where is the lie? That's a big question. Away from that, still on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning, ECOWAS court rejects bid to overturn $10,000 judgment against Nigeria. ECOWAS court rejects bid to overturn $10,000 judgment against Nigeria. You might want to find out details of that story on page 7 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Lagos LG polls, APC, opposition parties bicker over exercise. Lagos LG polls, APC, opposition parties bicker over exercise. You'll find a story on page 28, talking about the local government elections coming up in Lagos State. So much for the LG elections. Now the stakes are higher since we've started talking about autonomy of local government areas. So the stakes are quite higher. Political parties are much interested in making sure they are represented at the local government level of governance in Nigeria. Below that, we have another story. Ighodalo accepts Supreme Court verdict, decries robbery, betrayal of Edo people's trust. Ighodalo accepts rather Supreme Court verdict, decries robbery, betrayal of Edo people's trust. You find a story on page 6 talking about Aswe Ighodalo. Of course, he has accepted, according to this report, the Supreme Court verdict that upheld the election of Governor Monday Okpebholo of Edo State. But he calls it a robbery. He feels he's been cheated. But unfortunately, there is nothing he can do. The Supreme Court has ruled, and that's the final court, that's the highest court in the land. There is absolutely nothing he can do at this time. But he feels betrayed, according to him. He calls it betrayal of the Edo people's trust. Quite interesting. You might want to read up that story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And just below that, we have another story. ADC coalition faces uphill task to unseat Tinubu, says presidency. ADC coalition faces uphill task to unseat Tinubu, said presidency. Bode George, you'll find that story on page 6. Talking about the not new political party anyway. The ADC has been in existence for quite a while. In 2007, Professor Patu Tomi was the presidential candidate of the ADC, but now the ADC has become the new bride. The coalition parties have adopted the ADC as their platform to challenge President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2027 general elections. And in the ADC, you have big names such as former vice president and also presidential candidate of the PDP, that's the People Democratic Party, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. We have Rotimi Amechi, and of course, we also have Labour Party presidential candidate for 2023, Mr. Peter Obi. 3 of them have indicated their interest in the presidential ticket of the ADC. And a lot of critics are saying that this might just be the undoing, the biggest undoing of the ADC, that there will be crisis as a result of the personal ambitions of these individuals who are in the ADC. But the ADC is saying, hey, Nigerians, there is nothing to worry about, that their primaries will be free and fair and will decide who gets the tickets. According to the ADC, there is no preferred presidential candidate for the party going into 2027 general elections. So they will organize a free and fair primaries, and whoever wins gets the ticket. So what do we see as Nigerians? May the best man win. Away from that, I'm still on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. You can see a picture right there. That should be Guardian newspaper paid a courtesy visit, and we have the head branding, Alpha Morgan Bank, and other members of the executive team of the Alpha Morgan Bank after the Guardian paid a courtesy visit to the organization. And that will be all from the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Next, we take a look at the Nation newspaper. Let's check out some of the headlines on the Nation newspaper this morning. Visa restriction. Federal government rejects United States claim on reciprocity. Visa restriction. Federal government rejects United States claim on reciprocity. With the rider, president didn't stop 5-year visa for Americans. Nigeria won't accept Venezuelan criminal deportees. Talking about visa restrictions, the U.S. recently has imposed, visa restrictions on Nigerians, restricting Nigerians to 3 months single entry visa, claiming reciprocity. But the federal government has they've come out to say that no, that's not true. That Nigeria still issues 5-year multiple entry visas to American citizens. So why is the U.S. claiming reciprocity? If Nigeria hasn't stopped issuing 5-year multiple entry visas to American citizens, why is America stopping the 2-year multiple entry visa they normally issue to Nigerians? Now it's a 3-month single entry visa for Nigerians going forward. And the federal government of Nigeria is kicking against that. Let's see how that plays out. We'll talk more about that in the course of the program this morning. Away from that, moving to the top strip of the Nation newspaper this morning. Shatima visits ailing Buhari, Abdusalami in London. Shatima visits ailing Buhari, Abdusalami in London. You can find a story on page 5, talking about the vice president visiting ailing Buhari and Abdusalami. We do, wish them quick recovery. Talking about Nigeria's former president, General Muhammadu Buhari. Beside that, we have, I'm not in race for APC chair, says Akume. I'm not in race for APC chair, says Akume. You would recall that the national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, the APC, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, recently resigned, and there have been some speculations that the North Central zone of Nigeria will be vying for that position. But George Akume, the current SGF, the Secretary General to the Federation of the Government of Nigeria, is saying that he's not in a race for that position. He's contented with his current position. And let's see if it goes to someone else from the North Central extraction of Nigeria. Beside that, we have another story. Senate removes Natasha as committee. Senate removes Natasha as committee chair on diaspora. Senate removes Natasha as committee on diaspora chair. You find that story on page 27. I talked about that earlier when the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, announced the removal of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan as chairman of the Committee on Diaspora without citing any official reasons whatsoever for his actions. Away from that, still on the front page of the Nation newspaper this morning, Okpebholo, Supreme Court verdict victory for Edo. Okpebholo, Supreme Court verdict victory for Edo. With the rider, Obaseki Ighodalo kick. Of course, whenever a court ruling favors you, you call it victory, of course. So Monday Okpebholo is celebrating because the Supreme Court has ruled in his favor. But on the other side, we have Aswa Ighodalo, who feels betrayed, who feels he's been robbed. Quite unfortunate, but that's the Supreme Court, and that's the final verdict. So it's all celebration for Monday Okpebholo, who sees it as victory for the people, and on the other hand, Aswa Ighodalo sees it as betrayal of the people's trust. Away from that, moving towards the bottom of the Nation newspaper, we have Mustafa gets knocks for downplaying Tinubu's role in Buhari's 2015 triumph. Mustafa gets knocks for downplaying Tinubu's role in Buhari's 2015 triumph. You will recall that Mustafa made some claims saying that, hey, Tinubu did not make Buhari the president of Nigeria. He's been getting knocked, of course, from supporters of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu saying, hey, what do you mean? Without Tinubu, there wouldn't have been a Buhari in the first place. That's the story. And below it, we have a writer, Garba Shehu, no need for bickering. President's support vital. No need for bickering. President's support vital. That's according to Garba Shehu. And on the bottom strip of the Nation newspaper this morning, we have Tinubu hails commitment of Niger Delta youth, women to development. Tinubu hails commitment of Niger Delta youth, women to development. You find that story on page 6. And on the top strip of the Nation newspaper this morning, we have UBA announces strategic expansion into key markets across Africa. UBA announces strategic expansion into key markets across Africa. And that'll be all from the front page of the Nation newspaper this morning. Next, we move to the Daily Trust newspaper. On the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, LG funds, after 1 year, nothing has changed. LG funds, after 1 year, nothing has changed. Talking about local government funds. With the rider, councils received 3.408 trillion naira through state governments in 11 months. Councils received 3.408 trillion naira through state governments in 11 months. And below that, we see the breakdowns of FAC allocations totaling 3.408 trillion naira to 774 local government areas through states over 11 months. And the breakdown right there, we see for the month of July, we have 343.7 billion naira. For August, we have 306.5 billion naira. For September, we have 206.5 billion naira. For October, we have 355.6 billion naira. For November, we have 402.5 billion naira. For December, we have 361.7 billion naira. In January, we have 434.5 billion naira. February, we have 410.5 billion naira. March, we have 165.2 billion naira. April, we have 168.6 billion naira. And May, we have 153.8 billion naira. Talking about LG allocations, councils receiving a total of 3.408 trillion naira through state governments in the past 11 months. Away from that, below that, we have how Adoke stopped Jonathan from removing me as governor. That's according to Shatima, how Adoke stopped Jonathan from removing me as governor. And on the bottom strip, we have bandits abduct palace administrators, burn houses in Plateau community. Bandits abduct palace administrators, burn houses in Plateau community. You find that story on page 25. And beside that, we have once again Senate removes Natasha as Diaspora Committee Chair. You find that on page 10. And then we also have FCTA arrests 210 beggars in Abuja. FCTA, that's the Federal Capital Territory Administration, arrests 210 beggars in Abuja. That's page 34. Wait a minute. When you arrest beggars, what happens to them? When they arrest beggars, they take them to the police station, put them in jail. Well, if you arrest beggars and you put them in detention, well, thankfully, you have to feed them. What do you think, Nigerians? I mean, you arrest beggars, of course, you should feed them. Well, that's just on a lighter note. If you're trying to make our streets saner and cleaner, there should be ways to take care of that. I mean, social welfare. What do I know? Anyways, they've been arrested by the FCT administration. Let's see what happens next. Away from that, moving to the top strip of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Military airstrikes kill many terrorists in Zamfara, Kebbi. Military airstrikes kill many terrorists in Zamfara, Kebbi. Let's talking about, some gains on the part of the military against terrorists and bandits in some northern states right there. And beside that, amidst high electricity costs, varsities, health facilities yet to get subsidy. Amidst high electricity costs, varsities, health facilities yet to get subsidy. Talking about subsidy for electricity power supply. These key institutions are not getting any subsidies yet. And finally, from the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, Shatima visits Buhari in London. Shatima visits Buhari in London. We understand that he's not feeling so well. In the previous report, we saw that he visits Buhari, ailing Buhari in London. So we do wish him quick recovery. And that'll be all from the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Next, we take a look at the Nigerian Tribune. The Nigerian Tribune newspaper. How Adoke, others stopped Jonathan from removing me as governor. And that's coming from Shetima. How Adoke, others stopped Jonathan from removing me as governor. Why is this coming up now? With a rider, ex-AGF was hunted globally over $1.3 billion OPL 245 saga. And that's according to Jonathan. And below that, we have, I have forgiven everyone behind my ordeal. I have forgiven everyone behind my ordeal. That's coming from Adoke. You can read up the story on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. And on the top strip, we have Arawa Economic Forum warns against CBN's new BDC recapitalization. Arawa Economic Forum warns against CBN's new BDC recapitalization. That's talking about bureau de change right there. With a rider cites threat to northern economy, national security, seek extension of policy. You'll find all that on page 6. Beside that, UBA announces strategic expansion into markets across Africa. UBA announces strategic expansion into markets across Africa. And beside that, Nigeria won't bow to US pressure to accept Venezuelan deportees. Now that's coming from the federal government. Nigeria won't bow to US pressure to accept Venezuelan deportees. You find a story on page 28. Of course, it is not by force to accept deportees. If we don't want them, we don't want them. You can't force us to accept Venezuelan deportees. That's coming from the federal government anyways. Still on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Akpabio removes Natasha as Diaspora Committee Chair, appoints Akwa Ibom Senator in her place. Akpabio removes Natasha as Diaspora Committee Chair, appoints Akwa Ibom Senator in her place. You find a story on page 27. And below that, NNPCL must account for 210 trillion naira. Senate insists. NNPCL must account for 210 trillion naira. Senate insists. You find that on page 3. And below that, flood may unleash toxic chemical, poses risk to elderly ecosystem. UN warns. Flood may unleash toxic chemicals, poses risk to elderly ecosystem. UN warns. You'll find that story on page 22. And on the bottom strip, Supreme Court affirms Okpebolo as Edo governor. Supreme Court affirms Okpebolo as Edo governor. And that'll be all from the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And finally, we take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning. On the Punch newspaper, governors get 4.5 trillion naira LG funds 1 year after Supreme Court ruling. Governors get 4.5 trillion naira LG funds 1 year after Supreme Court ruling. That's on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning, talking about autonomy standoff. Absolutely. Moving to the top strip of the Punch newspaper this morning, we have Buhari government went after my allies post-2015 election. Buhari government went after my allies post-2015 election. That's coming from Jonathan, from former President Jonathan. You find that story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And beside that, NNPC refineries, corrupt politicians using NNPC refineries may never work again. That's from Dangote. I take that again. NNPC refineries may never work again. That's coming from Dangote. Coming from someone like Dangote, of course, he has a 650,000 barrels per day capacity refinery. And he's telling Nigerians that NNPC refineries may never work again. Why? That's the big question. You might want to find out by looking at page 23 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And just beside that, corrupt politicians using crypto wallets to launder money. Corrupt politicians using crypto wallets to launder money, coming from EFCC chair. Away from that, Nigeria rejected U.S. push to accept Venezuelan deportees. Nigeria rejected U.S. push to accept Venezuelan deportees. That's coming from Tugar. Nigeria rejecting pressure from the U.S. to accept Venezuelan deportees. And like I said before, we don't want them. We don't want them. There is nothing. How do you force a sovereign nation to accept deportees from other nations? I mean, it's not proper. Okay, we should be able to decide if we want to accept them or not. Still on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning, GTCO plans fresh expansion after London Stock Exchange listing. GTCO plans fresh expansion after London Stock Exchange listing. And on the bottom strip, Ighodalo angry as Tinubu governors praise Okpebholo's court victory. Ighodalo angry as Tinubu governors praise Okpebholo's court victory. You find that story on page 8. And beside that, we have 3-year-old boy dies inside Lagos soakaway. Oh, quite unfortunate. 3-year-old boy dies inside Lagos soakaway. You find the story on page 4 and 5. In case you're wondering, if you're not a Nigerian, you're wondering what is soakaway. Here in Nigeria, these are septic tanks. I mean, sewage tanks rather. I mean, of course, that's what it means. We call them soakaway here. Pits where, sewage goes into. A 3-year-old boy just died in one of those in Lagos. Quite unfortunate. And finally, from the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning, LG poll, ballot snatching will trigger by-elections. Lasiek won. Ballot snatching will trigger by-election. Lasiek won. That's talking about the Lagos State Independent Electoral Commission warning against ballot snatching. You'll find that story on page 6. And that'll be all from the front pages of Nigerian newspapers this morning. We'll take a short break. When we return, we look into other issues. Please stay with us. Hold on.
Kiriji War, also known as Ekiti-Parappa War, was waged among Yoruba main ethnic groups which emerged